Charles let me know that he wanted me involved in the music from the jump, but I didn't really think too heavily about it until after we shot it. And it was really cool also to collaborate with 3D from Massive Attack, who Charles and I are both huge fans of. I had been working with 3D before Charles reached out to me, and had a sense that the stuff we were working on perhaps belonged to this film. And so when I played stuff for Charles, of course, he really loved it. And then later when I placed, you know, sounds to images, it just worked. It really worked. And so, yeah, it was a lot of fun. And it's also cool to see that collaboration that was really just between two friends with no like idea where it would go, to find a home so rapidly. Like, it's real synergy, actually. It's kind of magical how it all came together.
Yeah, and the beautiful thing about that was, you know, Saul immediately made that connection, and that was actually, you know, I just imagined him coming on board and actually composing something completely just, you know, but he did to make that connection between the script that he just took in and the music he was collaborating and making with Robert, and it was a gift. And so going into production, actually I had heard music. I'd had an opportunity to listen to some sketches, which was pretty amazing, and very rare that you ever have that opportunity before you go into production. So just have a sense of a rhythm and a tone, at least, you know. So it was a gift. It was a very generous gift, and we're very lucky that we actually had these two amazing artists to contribute to the music. We're lucky.
I wanted to.
Nice.
My name is Sharonda Williams. Sorry, I didn't introduce myself. I wanted to ask you, Charles. It's such an interesting film, especially talking about generational violence. Now, I wanted to know specifically the intention of making it a noir film as well, because it adds this whole additional element to the film as you're discovering AKILLA'S past, but also to trying to uncover the mystery unfolding in the present day.
Yeah, it was. It came from twofold. I mean, I know that we've been depicted so many ways where in terms of violence in cinema, and I, you know, I feel like, you know, creating genre and genre is something that I'm interested in, but I'm looking for the soul of that as well, and trying to put meaning within these genres with you know, Black people at the forefront of these characters. You know, it's interesting that even the term crime noir, it's, you know, noir is Black. And we've never seen our people in these heroic story, you know, these roles. And so that is the drama and the cinema in me that I love. But in terms of, you know, trying to encompass this idea of even with these noir stories, you drop in on that character. You don't know much about them when they were a boy, and what actually drove them to that, where they are today. And yeah, and it was very important for me to really explore the boy who we don't really leave as men, and what happens in our future when we are confronted with that boy, which is ourselves, you know. And because I believe that boy, and, you know, if we remember the things that our mothers told us, if we remember these sort of things, and as we move into manhood, I think, I don't know, these are valuable sort of messages that I felt like if you didn't include that in the storytelling, then we wouldn't have certain insights into what shaped this man, you know, and how he actually deals with violence himself, you know. In the final scene, there's this big confrontation, and you know, it was, you know, the character actually has a gun on him, and we see that he actually shows up with one, but he's the only one in that final scene that doesn't pull it. And that is, to me, someone who's experienced violence from a certain way. It's like, you know, we would say in boxing, if you've never been punched in the face, you're the first person to want to start a fight, you know, and because you don't know what it feels like. And so to bring that into context from We Barely See Men, especially in the noir genre, they're saving the day with a gun, you know. And so just those concepts of flipping the genre for us was just my take on it, you know. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Katya was out of Philadelphia. It's a pleasure speaking with y'all today. Neptune, what I loved about your character was, although he was in this criminal life, he was a principled person, and he had a certain decorum, and I think we need to see more of that. You know, what does it say? There's honor amongst thieves. Was it important for you to portray something like that, to show that this character, yes, he was participating in illegal activities, but he wasn't a person without values, with a person without principles?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sorry, no, please, Saul. Yeah. I love it.
No, you know, it was extremely important for me to try to bring to life, you know, the character that Charles and Motion, you know, wrote so beautifully and vividly in their script. And what you enjoy about the character is something I truly enjoyed as well, is that element of restraint and the idea that this character had learned something, you know, like so many times you learn of you know, even when you hear about, you know, men, you know, becoming fathers and wanting to have boys, right? And wanting to impart some sort of idea of masculinity onto a boy or what have you. And here, you know, when Charles raises this question of like, how do we put a stop to generational trauma? And here you have a story where, you know, a boy, you know, yes, you know, the character's father did attempt to instill something in him, but also so much of what this boy learned was through his love and appreciation of his mother and his disdain, in a sense, for the certain aspects of the relationship between the father and the mother that made him realize who he wanted to become, and also very clearly who he did not want to become. And the way that that plays out in the storytelling, the way that, you know, my character, you know, sees himself reflected in the eyes of this little boy, and finds it important to say, oh my gosh, you know, he reminds me so much of myself. And the largest thing I've learned is this. And if anything, I need to impart that wisdom to this boy. I love that. I think that's crucial. When you look at like the social realm of things, you know, in the outside world, in the real world, and we talk about toxic masculinity and all of those things, these are the things that come into play. Is also how, you know, because it's not just about what the system does to Black men or to Black people, it's also about, you know, what we consider a hero or who we consider a hero, you know, and what we choose to emulate and what we think is great in a character or in a person. And for this character to show so much restraint and to say, you know, I'm figuring these things out. I don't have everything figured out, but I'm figuring these things out. And here's something that I don't want to play into and I don't want to see played into. And it hurts me to see young boys like me playing into this. It's a beautiful thing to share and to attempt to portray in cinema, especially when it's not, you know, in a corny message way, you know? So yeah, this is something that excited me about the script and project.
Absolutely, thank you.
Hi, it's Shane from Jamaica here. So I found it such a symbolic gesture to cast Bob Marley's daughter in this role, in this kind of like peacekeeping role, because, you know, in the beginning of the film, the prologue shows some of that political violence from that era where he was playing, you know, a peacekeeping role as well. So in terms of, you know, speaking to generational legacies, I thought it was really symbolic to cast her in that specific role. How did you go about getting her involved in this film?
Yeah, I've been following Denisha. It's funny, I start casting people well before they actually know I exist sometimes. And you know, I've been following Denisha and her activism and you know, I was just really fascinated with who she is as a human being. And it just so happened that she was moving to Canada, moving to Toronto. She appeared in a friend of mine's short film. And she was, you know, I've heard her express like, you know, aspirations of acting more, and so I reached out to her. I tracked her down and wrote her a note and asked her to come and read for this role. And she came in very, very openly. She understood what we're trying to say. She just got it immediately. And she came in and she just blew our minds. And she was just so, it's a one beautiful thing where there's somehow a project that actually connects with an actor, and they know that it's work and they know that it's a job, and they know, but there's something inside their souls that just connects to the material, and there's something that just naturally happens. And the moment she spoke, the first thing she did, it's like everyone, she was it, you know. But it was and having her spirit, and again, it's the human being and her spirit and what she represents is that's what I want, like, you know, the atmosphere on set, and who a young man, you know, like Thamela is around, and the other cast, and Saul, and, you know, this community. And I think that we, like, Saul comes from a long lineage of an amazing, you know, I mean, when I think of Saul, I think of, like, you know, this idea that came from another question was this perception about who our heroes are, and someone who's actually within a certain quote unquote criminal world, but have principles or are principled. And I think of Assata Shakur, I think of Nahanda Isokia Abiodun. I think of these individuals who've made these sacrifices, and for us as a community, but they were also deemed, you know, domestic terrorists, you know, and they were criminalized, like, completely. And now we're seeing right now the idea of what's happening in the world, and how this reckoning is going on, that self-governance is an important thing, you know, and these things that we actually understand as from our historical context, from Jamaica to Toronto to New York, like, our people are everywhere. And so I don't see this as this story that's isolated, and everything had this origin, and that's where I was trying to place that origin back to the political violence, and how that's, you know, that lack of governance causes and perpetuates the poverty and the disparity and the lack of opportunities for very, very talented people. And it's a very, very confusing thing to me when I think of someone like Bob Marley being there, and his whole entire message was about unifying and love and peace, but within this very, you know, caught between this political nonsense, you know. So having Denisha's spirit in this film, and having the film open with his music, was very important to just set the tone of the backdrop, you know.
Yeah, I could reiterate too that Denisha, you know, like, she's so perfectly fitted for this film, in that, you know, the spirit of her activism is so much about what the story is about. And then her first love really is acting, you know. She's been acting since she was a child, and really her commitment to the role and to the story was beautiful. I mean, she was wonderful to interact with as an actor, you know. And then, of course, when you talk about that legacy and her concerns, what that does for an actor, I think, when you can trust the project, when you have your own, you know, moral compass, so to speak, and you have your own messages and ideas that you want to see projected into the world, in the ways that you want to see the world change. And when you're involved in a project that also carries that, which Charles and Motion already had invested so deeply into, you know, the work, it allows you to invest yourself more, you know, more strongly, because then the workspace is a safe space. And so, you know, Denisha was extremely generous as an artist on this project, and yeah, it means a lot on many levels.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. My name's Thomasina out of Philly again, and this question is for Thamela. Did I pronounce your name correctly? Okay. It was really engaging to watch you as a young Akilla and Shepard both. And they have similar arcs, but I find it difficult to portray one over the other, and what was your process for portraying both of them?
Well, I mean, on set, you have a lot of references. You have a really good environment that you can help condition these roles in. So to play one, I guess, isn't really all too difficult. When, like, I know it's like the two roles thing can seem a bit daunting, but I mean, you just take the approach of, okay, well, this is one world that I need to be really familiar with, and here's another. And, in the script, it helps you a lot to see the way the story navigates, and that gives you a very strong and like solid guideline for how things should get done. So I mean, taking the approach of, okay, well, I'm going to do this first, understand it in this capacity, then do this first and understand it in its respective capacity, makes things a little bit easier. And I mean, like when I'm playing young Akila, I have the reference of Saul. I get to see the way that he conducts his character, for the little moments here and there where I can peek in on his scenes and see what he's doing. And also for when I'm playing Shepherd, I also have that as a guideline. So, I mean, it's largely in part to the environment that was created, given that we had such a wonderful cast and we had this great, super involved director that's kind of like an artistic juggernaut, and as well as Saul here that just helped me, find my bearings very easily.
He's amazing. He makes it sound so easy, right? He's a genius. Like he's, I say this to individuals. I mean, I met Tam when he was 13 years old, worked with him in a short film, then worked with him a few years later on a television series, and been watching this young man grow. And he is a generational talent. When we're talking, and that's what I have to say. And, I say this as, we're in Canada, so we're in Toronto. There's a bit of a different structure here at times around this business, but this boy in America being the work he's doing, I don't know. I don't know if I wouldn't even be able to get him, he'd be on Snowfall or something like that right now. But he is, he makes it look easy. He takes in information. He's just, he's curious. He just wants to know everything. He wants to know even how the camera's working and why we're shooting in a certain way and why does the light like this, and asking this, and then then it's like action, and he just goes into character. So it's a gift. I've worked with a lot of actors, and he's a gift.
A gift with a nice haircut. Nice haircut, Thamela.
Oh, you noticed. What? Just something small, just have to freshen up.
Thank you very much.
I have a question about the way you depicted the violence in the film. It seems like these types of stories that have been told before, starting with the New Jack City era, there's always been this explicit, this visceral type of violence. But here, there was less of that. It seemed more emotional, implicit. Was that what you were going for? And then if so, how did you kind of set that up as you were forming the film?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think at the core of it, it was always a deeper thought for myself and my process whenever I was confronting scenes that involve violence, sexuality, like really, but specifically around violence for this film. Very early on, I try to set parameters for myself, and there's this seduction to glamorize, violence, to create a sort of sense of energy and rhythm. And I think it's something that's become, from our television shows to films, it's contributed to our social acceptance of violence. I'm sensitive to how Black men are dealing with that on screen, even if I don't want to shy away from it, but I still think there's another layer of how you can show it and not say, oh, I'm not showing it because I just don't like it. I'm showing it, I'm thinking about point of view. And so the idea of point of view was always at and the emotional context of what it was always where I was asking myself, and with our cinematographer, Maya Bankovic, who I wanted a woman to shoot this film as well, specifically for that reason, because I think the way our point of view of how we interact as men, it's sometimes you can get in film, you know, the stunt coordinator and the cinematographer, they all want to make this sort of, you know, shoot 'em up crazy scene, but without a point of view. Who's it affecting? And so in that point, it was very important for me that even when we see the boy and the first time, the way he's holding the gun and he's not very good at it, and it's right there, and it's AKILLA'S point of view. It's right between, they're facing each other, and it's like, what are we going to do? You know, and that was more important to me than actually trying to articulate a different sort of genre-esque, you know, Michael Bay shoot 'em up scene. That's not what I needed to do here. And so that was really implemented in our design of the film, and it's a choice, and to some people, you know, the question about the sort of thing is like, is it going to be satisfying for individuals, and is it going to be satisfying in this way? But I had to talk myself into not just trusting that the emotional context of what, you know, I'm trying to say with it is enough, and go for that. And I'm not trying to imitate what John Singleton has done. I'm not trying to imitate what, you know, Spike has done. I'm trying to still find my own language with how I'm dealing with these moments, because they're going to present itself. If we want to tell the truth about some of our experiences, we have to face the love and the intimacy and the violence and the trauma and the joy. So I do want to approach each levels of those things. It's part of my evolution.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Hi, this is Nancy. I have a question about, I felt like everything in the movie was well placed, the pacing was great, but I do wonder, were there any scenes that you had to cut out that were really difficult for you to get rid of in the final cut?
Oh man, yeah. There's probably about four moments that are still haunting me, because I think about, you know, during the process, you know, hindsight, it's funny, you end up cutting a film and then you're like, oh man, all the things that come to you like after you lock picture, it's amazing. But there was this opening scene where the film actually originally started with AKILLA in a travel agency. And there was a sequence that came out of the Jamaica, and it kind of flowed into this travel agency and into the monitor. And it found AKILLA in his travel agency deciding where he was going to go, like to get away. And it was this conversation. It was almost like, you know, thematically from the Iliad, when you're given these choices of, are you going to flee, or are you going to stay and fight, or what are you going to do? And he's sitting there with this brochure about going to, I think it was Cayo La Visa or something in Cuba, I think it was, and just to kind of give that indication that he was going somewhere, he was shutting something down, because later on in the film you just see her pick up this plane ticket, and I left that in the end, although I didn't, but I did think of a way that later on how I could have weaved that in, which would have been a very interesting cinematic choice in terms of the editing. But there was that moment, and there was also another moment with young AKILLA at the hospital. It was a very strong, emotional, beautiful moment where the doctor is telling young AKILLA that his mother is in a coma, and decided to take it out, but Tam's performance in it was so powerful, his face, and I kept it in there for such a long time. His emotion, and it was so, I was like, I don't want to lose that, but we just cut to him kind of walking into the hospital room. So those are two moments that stand out that I've been in the film still.
Okay.
This is the moment I realized that I haven't seen the final cut of the film. Wow.
Yeah.
I had a question for you. My question is, you know, it seems that Akilla really makes a point to not follow into the direction of his father. And there's something that his mother says to him when he's young about not letting greed and ambition, you know, really make you a prisoner, you know, in your own life. And so I want to know from you, Saul, portraying that character, do you feel that this is why Saul doesn't want to kind of expand when he's having this business meeting? We see this conversation that he first has at the facility where he doesn't want to continue to do this now legitimized business. I want to know, do you feel that that's him trying to stop the generational cycle of becoming his father? And also too, for you, Charles, just from a writing standpoint, how Saul's character, Akilla, how his discipline and his really trying to stifle his growth in a certain aspect. I just want to get your thoughts on that. And Saul, we can start with you.
Sure. I mean, great question. I think that, yes, I think that Akilla listened to his mother and learned something, and he learned something great. And it's true, as you said, you know, many around him question, like, business is just starting to boom. Why would you, you know, make this decision now? And in his response of, like, you know, like, booming businesses and everything, and that idea of flexibility and realizing, you know, when the window is open, not just for, you know, this perpetual idea of success, you know, but for survival, is necessary. And it's a huge fork in the road where I would say he makes the right decision. But I think that, you know, many people in real life oftentimes are faced with decisions such as that, and they may not always make the right decision because we have, you know, these lessons that come to us from all directions of, like, girl, you better get that money, you better, you know, all that type of shit, you know? And it's awesome that I mean, that's just in the script, you know, that's how Charles wrote it. So of course he should respond to this as well. But I love that choice. Because I think that he's imparting wisdom, and his mother as a character truly imparted wisdom, which I think is important for us to hear, especially, you know, growing up in a climate such as this, you know, where we're led to believe that ambition and ego and drive are the winning characteristics, you know, of not simply of manhood, but of success, right? And to learn how to temper that, to learn how to even be aware of what's driving you at times, you know, it requires a sort of sensibility and sensitivity that is not always given, you know, that comes with a form of meditation, perhaps a certain, you know, scanning of the self, where you're able to say, okay, this may be the moment where I could benefit this way from this, but all the other aspects of myself could be lost here. And for the character Akilla to have that sort of wherewithal, and even more so for Charles and Motion as screenwriters to bring that idea into play in this film, I think is another generous offering for the viewer.
This is Kathy again. I have a question for Thamela. Am I saying the name correctly? If I'm not, I apologize. That is the worst, when somebody butchers your name. My question to you is that I think you showed tremendous maturity in playing this role, and one of my favorites was when you were talking to the actress that plays your mother, and she, you know, you're telling her she needs to get out. How was it playing that role, and what did you do to prepare?
Well, for young Akilla, you know, the script and seeing how older Akilla turns out, there's a lot of things that need to happen, and there's a lot of kind of impasses that this character goes through. So it's kind of like playing out all the scenarios that older Akilla encountered as a youth that resulted in who he is when we see him in the modern day timeline of the script. So it's, you know, being this boy who, in this story that's very common, being this boy who, you know, is trying to make something of himself, trying to do it in a way that doesn't like result him dead or in the hospital or in, you know, juvenile detention, but also trying to be smart about it, trying to take a different route, and, you know, having an end goal in mind, of which, you know, is not something very common. Like, I see this character as really trying to break the mold, trying to, you know, kind of make it out and make it out on top. So, you know, it's going through that narrative where it's like, I'm not trying to have my life end here. Eventually, like, I want to get out, but I want to get out in a different way. I want to take my own stride. So it's that character that's just starting to form that, you know, we should see in this character. Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of what's going through my head, like, as I was playing younger Akila, and of course, you know, the close relationship that he has with his mom, that's played by Olanuke, you know, and us just having that rapport on set. Like, you know, one thing that I can really appreciate Charles for is just creating such a comforting and like welcoming like environment, a scene almost, like, where it's just like very, very collaborative. So just to have her on set, knowing that I've worked with her before, just helped me create that authenticity that you get from two people that have interacted before. And, you know, when it's a mother-son relationship, something so nurturing, you know, like it aided me in that process of understanding, okay, well, you know, this is a character that's trying to, you know, that knows the kind of family dynamic that he has, and is also very like protective of his mother. So just having that nature to it was really easy in the environment that was set up. So yeah, that's a lot of what was going through my head, like.
And you did great, and Charles, you shot it beautifully. Like, the tight close-up was really intimate.
Thank you, beautiful. You know, again, like, these actors, they wear it. They wear it on their faces and their emotions. They don't need to speak, and they say so much. And that's the beauty of who they are. So just glad to be able to put a camera on. But Sharonda, I want to just circle back to, you know, the question you asked, and just in relation to what Saul was speaking about. And you know, it's fascinating just listening to this conversation. I'm realizing that although there was this, you know, there's young man playing young Akila, and then there's Saul playing Akila, I've really only seen them as one person. And only right now in this conversation, I'm realizing, oh yeah, there were actually two people. It's fascinating. But so what I'm talking about is, in, you know, when young Akila is with his mother, and she says, you know, a man must understand his weakness. And I think that is also a little line in there that's indicating in the writing of you know, older Akila, understanding the weakness of succumbing to the seduction again. Like, I can make more money in this sort of now, you know, government approved cycle of things. But he's going to analyze these choices, because that could lead him down another road where money and greed and these sort of things that are weaknesses, you know. But as we get older, how do we identify them and when they face us? And so and then from his father, he's hearing about self-governance, but he's also being groomed into you know, this world that actually, part of that question for me of even exploring this story was, when a boy just doesn't belong there, you just don't belong there. And to me, that references the parent who wants a child to be, you know, a basketball player, but they just don't belong there. But you're pushing this grooming and that's what I think, that's the weight of like a generational trauma, is being just pushed upon. the youth, you know. And so with Akilla being this man and having these sort of messages, again, like my experiences, like, you know, my father gave me, you know, in an hour-long monologue, there was like one really solid sentence that I would take away, right? And so that lecturing and that thing of that history, but he is talking about, you know, again, he knows what happened to his father. He knows that he served this government that actually ended up taking his own life. But at the same time, he's trapped in something, and is also offering his son the only thing he knows. And I remember in the script, I repeated that line at times where it's like, you know, when we met up with, you know, when young Akilla, there was a period in the script where young Akilla arrives in Toronto and had a whole sequence where he first meets the Greek as a boy. And he starts to rely upon the only thing he knows to survive, which was what he learned from his father, which was selling some drugs here in Toronto. And then he scaled it up and kept it this certain way and was able to actually look at it as corporation and business, which is what, you know, he mentions again, like, you know, the governments wanted to become the Starbucks of cannabis. And it's like this idea of these corporate structures, you know, and where does one fit in it? And where do you find your autonomy? So Saul representing that to me, knowing who he is as a person, but his acting skills, but also this in applying that to this character, like he understands what Asata and what those folks were going through and has that spirit. So that is what I think was amalgamation of these characters, and someone in exile, you know, having to leave home and leave this place and having to make a new life, but rely upon certain things and being kind of a bit underground in a way, but maneuvering in a certain way. That to me is like someone who's a political exile, you know.
How did you
Hello?
get Vince Staples? How did you get Vince to be in this film?
Oh, Vic Mensa?
Yes, sorry, Vic. Sorry. Wow,
Yeah.
what am I saying? It's a long day.
No,
How did you get Vic to be in this film? Because that was a cool get.
It was a very cool get, and it's again like this is the magic of some of these things that just happen. The co-producer of the film, Jake Yanowski. So he's Chicago born and raised, and when we met 5 years ago and we started to work together and show him the script and you know, he definitely wanted to get this thing going. And when we're talking about casting, and he said, "Have you thought about Vic Mensa to play Prince?" And I'm like, I love him, but you know, in Canada, when you're making films of a certain budget size, you have these rules of how many non-Canadians you can use. Ridiculous rule. And I already had Saul, and I'd already been thinking of Denisha, and Denisha was just getting her citizenship in Canada, so she was still on the fence. So, but I said, I don't care, you know, let's reach out to him, and he agreed to do it immediately. Not because he knew me, he definitely knew Jake, but the main reason why I agreed to do this movie was because of Saul Williams. Because Saul Williams has been instrumental in this young man's journey as an artist. And Saul can maybe speak on that, but this is what I didn't know that. I didn't know that Vic had a connection to Saul Williams, and I had wanted Saul to play in this role. And I didn't know that my producer grew up with this guy in Chicago. So that's kind of how it happened from my point of view.
Yeah, and I've known Vic since he was like 15. And so I have a poet friend, Aja Monet, who had served as a kind of mentor to him as a young artist in Chicago. And she introduced me to him when he was like 15 and kind of having issues at home based on the fact that he wanted to go into music, and his family, who, you know, I think his dad's a doctor or what have you, like they really weren't understanding of like an artist in the family. And and so I had, you know, played a mentoring role with him as a teenager, and had, you know, kept up with him through the years and what have you. And so, yeah, he was also a friend of mine over the years, and we've collaborated as musicians as well. And so it made a lot of sense.
It's Thomasina from Philly again. Charles, I think you mentioned about the universal theme, really, of the criminalization of Black boys, that it really is universal story. You also said that you created this story to reflect on the question that what is the cost to escape general violence? And that's any of you, but in particular, what do you believe the answer is to that? What is the cost to escape generational violence?
It's a great question. I think, you know, as I'm getting older, I'm thinking about the level of sacrifice to be made for next generation. And I think that is something that may be something you have to sacrifice within yourself. You know, I still think this is about an internal question as well as an external one. I struggle with the idea, and maybe I didn't, you know, I question what those answers are, because it feels to me that the cost is always so much. And the question of why it costs so much at times. But I think, you know, we are, as adults and as we get older, we're supposed to be leading to some degree and looking after that, our young brothers and sisters, and trying extra hard to do that. And I think that that is something where maybe it's a bit naive, but it's a time of also why I wanted to make this film was not just about the film and the story, but it was also extending our community. You know, Denisha is now a parent, and she just had her first child. You know, so I feel like that child is now part of our community that we have to look after, and that extension. You know, Saul has children. It's like Thamela. There's something about how I feel like expanding our community, having this conversation here too, just as a way of how we can, you know, I think that times with some of these traumas, we don't talk about them in a certain way, you know? And I know sometimes it's the hard thing about making film is that sometimes it's like when the lights go back up and everyone goes back to their lives, that we forget about these sort of things that we've been touched on or by. And so I'm still trying to figure out that answer, to be honest with you. Like, you know, but I do think that it's in each of our communities, and what we do and what we see and what we think is local is actually, I think, is bigger than we think, you know, and how we affect locally. So I think, yeah, that is, you know, there's an organization called Think Twice that has been involved with this film that came to set, and this woman's been working with young men who've been incarcerated and reintegrating, and you know, just seeing them exposed to this expression of telling a story, like it's affected them. Like the relationships that I've had with them, they're writing plays, but they're not writing plays just to become playwrights. They're writing to really kind of like, it's a catharsis, you know, a cathartic thing that we're doing. And I think that's the power of the medium and the art and storytelling that helps us to just deal with some of these things.
Yeah, I mean, I'll piggyback here. You know, I mean, I think there's many levels to it. You know, on one hand, there has been a generational violence enacted upon us as you know, Black members of society. There, you know, as we know what's been passed on and through, whether it's the criminal justice system or the patriarchy at large, you know, and what that does to the psyche, and what that does to how we, you know, what we teach our children, what we grow to expect from ourselves, how much we can take, how much we can't take, how we're forced to temper ourselves. And then the next question that comes to mind is the fact that we are also required, I think, to ask ourselves harder and harder questions, you know, so that, you know, we have to, you know, like in one generation, you look back and you'll see pictures of our, you know, grandparents or parents holding signs that might say stuff like, I am a man, or what have you. And for us, you know, we also have these questions of like, well, what exactly does it mean to be a man? What exactly is the bullshit connected to that idea of manhood and malehood that's more about domination and control, that stems from, you know, a society rooted in a patriarchal sort of, you know, positioning of control of women and environment and all this stuff. How much of what I've been taught about being a man is even real? And how much of that is programming? How much? And then, so then the question becomes like, well, how do I deprogram myself? Because I can't be of any good or of any use, you know, talking to my kids if I'm just carrying the baggage that was passed on to me without question, whether it came from the church, whether it came from the law, whether it came from my parents, what have you. How do I form the questions even to realize that some of what I'm trying to pass on or whatever is bullshit? Then of course there's the role that trauma plays, right? The things that you had no power over, that you would never choose to be exposed to, but you were, and you can't control the fact that you were, and it's made you a particular way. And so then the question of mental health, the question of you know, what's so popular right now in terms of self-care, but what that means in more practical sense is, you know, how do I wean myself off of the reactionary positioning that the trauma, you know, imposed upon my life? How do I make it so that I'm not simply reiterating that trauma for someone else? How do I stop the domino effect? And so what does that mean? You know, for some people, you know, they've made the wrong decisions. Like you look at like the role of, like, I grew up at a time where most of the families or kids I grew up with weren't necessarily in touch with their dads, right? And you might imagine that some of those dads may have left so as not to become their fathers.
Yes.
Right? You may think that they were like, I'm about to do some shit that I saw my dad do, and I just got to take my space because I don't know how to operate under the shit that's coming to me from the outside, the shit I'm feeling in the inside, and this in my intimate space. I'm just going to go someplace where it feels easier. And maybe that's an easy decision, right? So then it becomes a question of, how do I not make the easy decision? How do I do something that's impactful? That's impactful not only to you know, what I feel I need for my strength and well-being, but also what those around me can benefit from. So we have to ask harder and harder questions, make harder and harder decisions to not, you know, carry on that trauma. And I can't say that we're necessarily successful. You know, that's part of the reason why you see so many youth in the streets today, is because we've done what we could. And youth wake up then are like, yeah, but not enough, not enough, not enough. And I can't take it like you took it. No way, you know? And so we all just basically have to play our parts, but we have to play our parts to the best of our abilities, you know, which means we have to challenge ourselves. We have to raise questions. We have to ask questions, you know, sometimes at times when it feels inappropriate, at times when it feels, you know, like it's going to ruin the vibe. You know,
right?
So yeah, it's an ongoing process and practice, I think.
Thank you all very much.
It's beautiful, beautiful song.
Hi, I'm Jonita. Right outside of Chicago, actually, and my question has to do with that. There's a lot of programming now over there to, you know, kind of address the violence through trauma-informed prevention programs, and there's some great ones that are out there. Some of them involve the arts. And I was wondering, maybe Charles, this is for you. Do you see your film as kind of an educational, or you know, did you even intend of it having an educational component? Because that was one of the things that I kept thinking, that this kind of fits along with some of the programming that I've seen over in some of the, especially the Bronzeville neighborhood, where they're trying to put this trauma-informed care into position. So was it intended, or, you know, is there now any intention to make it, you know, educational?
I think that, yeah, I think educational elements live within the storytelling, and I think that it was definitely, you know, I've said it before, but I haven't said it here, but I feel like this film is it's for the boys and the men, like the black men and the black boys. Like, and I really, you know, and I don't want to, again, like cinema and who it reaches and who you make things for. I feel like that's who I've made it really for. And so I think storytelling is educational. I think that there's a definite component. I don't want to feel like, oh, this is, you know, I want young men to watch this. I do. I wanted to, and I know Vic works with an organization, I believe with Chance as well, and we're going to set up our own screenings. We're going to do our own public thing, community thing, independently of like any sort of theatrical thing and distributor thing. And that's the important part for me, is to take this film and again, with Think Twice and other communities here. There's some in across the country in Canada that I know about, and in New York, and Jamie Hector, and certain individuals that I do want to reach out to with this film and expose it that way. So I do feel that there's a component there. I'd love it to be screened in universities. I think there's still also, you know, that historically, for anyone, the individuals who are doing thesis papers, they want to write about Jamaica and political factions and how they affect society and go deeper. And you know, I just hope that people find ways of exploring things themselves that will, you know, in turn, you know, create a sort of self-education process of some kind, you know. Formally and informally, I guess, is that long-winded question answer was. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Well, thank you again, everyone.
Thank you guys. Wonderful film.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Yes, it was great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right.